And now, my friends, on talkSPORT and talkRADIO, time for half a dozen Freeview film recommendations with our mate, Mr. Van Connor, our Van Friday when it comes to all film knowledge. And, of course, we've got a couple of action films, we've got a great British film, and we've got, shall we say, a paranoid conspiracy theory film from the early 1970s to end them all. Let's start, though, with Van Connor's recommendation after we say good morning to him. Good morning, Van. What a week it's been, mate, and you've chosen some absolute crackers this week. You preempted me on one, which is coming up later. I also love your first recommendation, Mission Impossible 3. Good morning, Van.
Well, good morning to you, Mr. Ross. And you know what? I saw an absolutely blinding Christmas set action movie this week. So I thought, why not keep that action train running? And all three of my picks this week are actually pretty cracking action thrillers. And one of them's having its 25th anniversary this year. So why not? Let's keep the explosions and the bullets flying.
Okay, so it's on E4. It's tonight at 11 o'clock. Tell us why you've chosen this one. I know it's some brilliant set pieces. What marked this out for you, though, from the other Mission Impossible films?
Yeah, Mission Impossible 3, which I think was the feature film debut, the feature film directorial debut of J.J. Abrams, who, you know, now sort of a household name for directing movies, wasn't really back then. I think he was really known as being the Lost and Alias guy, although if you're a real nerd, he was the Felicity dude as well. And he made the third Mission Impossible movie, and he did such a good job with reinventing the Mission Impossible formula that on the back of the opening weekend of this, they gave him Star Trek to do.
I mean, that's a thank you, isn't it? That's a thank you and a half.
Oh, totally, because it's both Paramount properties, both their big franchise at the time. And the thing that sticks out with me, I think Mission Impossible 3 is an incredibly underrated movie. It's from 2006. It's on E4 tonight at 11 o'clock. And the reason to see this was I still think this has the best villain of the entire franchise in the form of the late, great, inimitable Philip Seymour Hoffman, who plays an international arms dealer / terrorist named Owen Davian. And when we get to the clip, you'll sort of get a hint as to why. He is absolutely terrifying in this movie. And he was a very lovely actor. He was one of those actors you saw and you felt very charmed by his presence. And he, as a villain, is just absolutely horrifying. And
can I make a confession?
Brilliant.
I was talking yesterday about movies on the show, as we often do, and I mentioned then, among my other inexplicable aversions, I don't like, for example, Swedes, carrots and parsnips. I really have never been able to drink Pernod, and I've never really liked Philip Seymour Hoffman on the big screen. I don't know why. I'm sure the fault is mine. I think when he turns up, I don't believe him, except in this film, and he is cracking in this film. So you've got a clip for us, I think, as well, for Mission Impossible 3.
I have got a clip for you. This is Philip Seymour Hoffman's Owen Davian having captured and restrained Ethan Hunt, Tom Cruise's Ethan Hunt. He's also got his new wife hostage as well, and he just wants a MacGuffin from Tom Cruise called the Rabbit's Foot, which Tom Cruise has no interest in giving to him. And as these movies always want to do, it's a case of, you know, give me what I want, or I'm going to kill the one you love. But Cruise deals with this in a way that you could only do opposite a performance as great as Philip Seymour Hoffman. He makes Tom Cruise even better. As you'll hear in this clip, you can see this tonight, E4, 11 o'clock. It's an absolute banger.
Watch it. You have no choice but to accept that mission. Here we go.
Please, don't do this. Just let it go. I promise you. I promise you. I can figure out how to get whatever you want.
9.
Please. Listen to me. I want to help you. I want to help you get whatever you want. But you got to do what's right. What you know is right. No. No. No.
10.
Oh, blimey, Charlie. So it's 11 o'clock tonight, E4. Well, I'm keeping the action theme going with a film that's a kind of guilty pleasure of mine. I think it's the only thoroughly decent film Steven Seagal ever made. It's from 1992. It's 30 years old this year, when he was about 35 pounds lighter. It's called Under Siege. It's on Film 4 tonight at 9 o'clock. It stars Tommy Lee Jones, always fantastic, the incomparable Gary Busey, who gives a great psychopath in this film, Erica Ellen Knight, who people might know from Baywatch, and if you're a fan of the female form, I don't say this in any lascivious way, but there's a moment when she emerges from a barrel because she's a kind of booked on board this wonderful boat as a stripper, which you may be rewinding, or in the old days of VHSs, you'd be, rewinding and then fast forwarding and then watching in slow-mo. And also, of course, you've got Cole Meany turning up as well. Very start of Cole's career. Basically, terrorists hijack a gigantic ship, and there's nobody to fight them except the ship's cook. The chef. It's Under Siege. It's Film 4 tonight at 9 o'clock. And I think you're a bit of a, like me, you're a bit of a, almost a guilty Steven Seagal, if not fan. I'm kind of obsessed with the man.
Well, I told you, one of my very favourite books ever is a book by one of the former Ain't It Cool news writers, Vern. It's called Seagology, a study of the ass-kicking films of Steven Seagal, and it covers every single one of the man's movies up to the point it was written in about 2006, 2007, up to and including hit a performance by his band, which I understand you've seen. Absolute cracker. Check that one out.
The band was called Thunderbox, and I saw them at the Swan at High Wycombe, and they were as average as you might expect. Steven Seagal performed throughout, sweating profusely. At one point, naturally, I'm sure that the darkened hair colouring he had in his head was running down the side of his face. And the band's called Thunderbox, which is a euphemism, he didn't know that from back in the day, for a portable lavatory in the Indian Army days. An interesting night that was for me. But a very good friend of mine's other half's an actor, and she told me that this chap, her chap, was booked to appear in a Steven Seagal film. Can't remember the name, and they blew into one. And he did all his lines, and they never saw Steven Seagal. And when he went and saw the film, obviously Steven Seagal had said the line completely wrongly, but nobody dared correct him. My friend's other half had to say, "Yes, I can." It was the only line in the film. But Steven Seagal didn't say, "Will you do that for me?" He said, "Have you done that for me?" And they cut to the man saying, "Yes, I can." And nobody dared say to Stephen, "You've got that wrong, matey." That's the kind of power in these films he still seems to churn out. It's Under Siege, though. Truly a great action movie. It's a 9 o'clock tonight film 4 from 1992. Here's a burst of the trailer.
It was the final voyage of America's mightiest battleship.
What's on this helicopter?
This little sweetheart, Miss July 89.
God, I love this business. I love you.
The party was wild.
Love you to death.
They really knocked them dead. Imagine this arsenal of tactical nuclear weapons falling into the wrong hands. The Pentagon never did.
4 minutes ahead of schedule. Damn, I'm good.
Now, a team of terrorists have taken over.
Wake up the president.
But there's just one thing they didn't count on. The cook.
Are you like some special forces guy or something?
No, I'm just a cook.
Oh my God, we're gonna die.
Oh my God, we're going to die. In fact, you had the inestimable pleasure, I think, once of meeting Erica Ellen Knight, did you not?
I did. I met her at Milton Keynes Comic Con about 15 years. She was heavily pregnant at the time. I was with a friend of mine who had his newborn son with them. They bonded. It was a great way in to sit and chat with her for like 15 minutes because as my friend and she were bonding over pregnancies and babies. And you know what? She was just as stunning in person as she was in the movie. I will stress this was 15 years ago though. Good
to know. Now, we've also got another next recommendation from our pal Van Connor, and it's another action film, only slightly grimmer, slightly darker one, directed by Man Reddy's birthday yesterday, Ridley Scott's Black Hawk Down from, I think, 2001. Is that right?
Yes, this movie is somehow 21 years old. I remember going to the opening weekend to watch this, which now makes me feel old as hell. This is the movie that I think redefined the war movie for the 21st century. I think there's really this, and I think 3 or 4 years earlier we'd had Saving Private Ryan, which had really changed the game with how you depicted the horrors of war using modern technology in cinema. And Black Hawk Down was just, it was unmatchable. About a year later we had Star Wars Episode 2 Attack of the Clones, and the one comment everyone came out with after they'd seen it for the first time was, you know, that third act, that really got a bit Black Hawk Down, didn't it? Yeah. And that's when I knew that it was part of the cinematic mythos then. So this is the story of that one night in Mogadishu in the early 90s in which the US Armed Forces had their asses handed to them. It's an absolutely harrowing tale of the horrors of war, with an all-star cast that includes everyone from Eric Bana to Ewan McGregor to even Jason Isaacs, as Ethiopia just descends into outright civil war with American armed forces just caught in the middle of it. You can see this on Paramount Saturday night at 9 o'clock, which is kind of the perfect time to see it. It's a very good beer and pizza movie, but at the same time, it works kind of fundamentally as a sort of Sunday afternoon at 3 p.m. kind of movie as well, if you're going with the I'm watching a historical drama element. Absolute cracker. Ridley Scott directs this like no one else besides his own late brother could have done. Yeah. And, I've got a clip for you. It's 9 o'clock on Saturday night on Paramount. I've got a clip for you as the rescue squad attempts to storm in and liberate some of the trapped soldiers in the middle of the war zone. Also got Tom Hardy, Orlando Bloom. It is a real star cast. It won 2 Oscars, I think. One for sound editing and another one. I can't remember which one, but they're both kind of technical awards. It is a bit of a crack up. It's Paramount. It's 9 o'clock tomorrow night. Black Hawk Down. Here we go.
men loaded up. We're getting the hell out of here.
Yes, sir.
5-6-4. Rescue column has arrived. We'll be at your location in about 5 minutes. Prepare your men for expo, Sergeant. Yeah, roger that, sir. Roger that. 5 minutes. The convoy's gonna be here in 5 minutes.
Wow. I mean, when I saw it the first time, I kept kind of thinking, yeah, but why are they in Mogadishu in the first place? But if you park your concerns about geopolitics, which all seems very distant now, it is an absolutely, as an example of filmmaking. I mean, you think Ridley Scott has made that, and Thelma and Louise, and The Duelists, and so many other fascinating films, you realise the kind of breadth of the man's talent. He can pretty much do anything, I think, when it comes to movies.
Yeah, I mean, he made a movie last year that got really overlooked. It's on Disney Plus. It went to Disney Plus quite quickly, called The Last Duel with Matt Damon and Adam Driver, which I thought was absolutely banging. I cannot get over it. It's kind of Rashomon, but as a sort of period piece. I think it was 13th century drama with an actual duel. Absolutely incredible. Ridley Scott, he can make some rubbish, but he can make some absolute corkers too.
He's the governor. And now we go to a film that I absolutely love. I mean, I regarded this at the time, and maybe I'm being perverse, as a bit of a Western, because basically it's about the end of a certain type of era, the outlaw era, but you could say in London. And it's from the man who starred in The Long Good Friday. It's Bob Hoskins, of course it is, in Mona Lisa. In this, he's a much more world-weary figure. He's still called George, and he's coming out of, prison, and his kind of old tough guy image is no longer working. There's a new breed, a new generation of far more ruthless, far more brutal, terrifying criminals on the streets. But he gets a job working for an old gang boss, played by Michael Caine brilliantly, in this one very corrupt, very decadent, completely unsympathetic figure by the end of the film, Michael Caine. And that means he's a great actor because you get over his natural kind of liking for him. And he starts driving around a cool girl, played by Kathy Tyson, one of the faces of the 80s. Great 80s film, this, and great flashy photography and cinematography, directed by Neil Jordan. And he gets close to this woman after a lot of rows and wrangles with her, and he decides to help her. And that's when I think the kind of Western notion comes in, because while there isn't a big shootout in this, there is that sense of one man making a stand, one man making a difference. It's very scary at times, and also I think it's got one of the great overlooked performances by Robbie Coltrane, the late Robbie Coltrane, who plays a kind of bloke who runs a garage, who's George, as played by Bob Hoskins' mate. And he mentions in it a book he's reading called The Deadly Percheron, and that's simply seeking out, I thought, is this made up? And if you've never read any of the books, folks, if you like crime books of John Franklin Bardeen, read it. The Deadly Percheron's one. There's one about a guy called Philip Banter, and also Devil Take the Devil and the Blue-Tailed Fly. 3 books he wrote in 18 months. He was an advertising guy, and they're absolutely amazing crime novels. And then the rest of the stuff he wrote was rubbish. But it's weird that it's that kind of film, odd, fragmented, the kind of conversations you overhear in pubs and cafes and want to hear more of. And at the heart of it is an absolutely heartbreaking story of love and fear and redemption, and I know it's dated in some ways. It's shot in a slightly too 80s-tastic ways for some taste, not for mine. And it's on Talking Pictures TV tomorrow night, 11:35 p.m. If you've never seen it, folks, I think you're in for a rare old treat. Now, this was probably before you started going to the cinema, probably before you were even on planet Earth. But surely you must have seen this movie in the past, have you, Ben? I think it's a lovely film, this.
Oh, I absolutely have. I'm a very big fan of 80s, specifically 80s Bob Hoskins, because the man just really knew to seek out interesting projects and interesting directors. I mean, how you go from this to something like, Who Framed Roger Rabbit in the space of a couple of years.
And he was making mermaids around this time. He was obviously working with Cher and stuff. It's interesting. And of course, he got Academy Award nominated for this. He lost out to Paul Newman for The Colour of Money. And I can't help but thinking that while Paul Newman, it was almost a kind of recognition Oscar for Newman. He'd never won one before. And of course, Colour of Money is great in, but it was a reprise of his, of his role in The Hustler. Whereas Bob Hoskins, he creates something very different. It's somebody who's very difficult, I think, to play very dim and sympathetic. Robert De Niro can do it, and Bob Hoskins does it in this, and it's really endearing performance by him. It's on 11:35. It's very scary at times indeed as well. It's the war of, also changing London. It's the back of King's Cross when that was kind of rife apparently with streetwalkers, and, it's a hideous time. And London's transition from the kind of grim 70s through the yuppie era into something where we are now. Talking Pictures TV, 25 minutes to midnight. Tomorrow night, it's Mona Lisa. Here's a chunk of the trailer.
She is mysterious, unattainable. He is decent, ordinary.
The business is different, but the rules are still the same.
Dependent upon each other.
Go look at our best. You should notice these things.
They are different in every way.
Did anybody ever teach you manners?
Do you want to work for me?
No. That's
tell me I'm fired.
All right, you're fired.
Lovely. I'm fired and you're street walking.
Things can happen out there. If you last a year and a half on that street, you're lucky. I was lucky. I got out.
Ooh, very grim film that is, of course. And also, first time I've ever seen somebody in a jacuzzi. Michael Caine tells a terrible joke, but in a jacuzzi in one of the scenes. Now, my next recommendation, my final one, I've recommended before. I won't bother with a clip of it. I would say, though, if you've never seen it, it's 1 o'clock in the wee small hours of Sunday morning, so it just tips over after Saturday. 1 o'clock in the morning, BBC Two. It's called The Conversation, starring Gene Hackman, John Cassett-Seal, great cast, directed by Francis Ford Coppola. I would say it's his best film, even better than Godfather 2, I think, but that's just a personal quirk. And it's a remarkable film about the man who's, played by Gene Hackman, who's an expert in surveilling people, bugging people, listening on conversations. And because of that, he starts to fear for the fate of a young couple. And he becomes involved in that world and does something unforgivable in his line of work. He starts to kind of decide he wants to alter the outcome of what he's listening to. It's a bit like The Lives of Others, that East German film that won the Oscars a while ago. And it's kind of a prequel, although unplanned, to Enemy of the State, which was the Will Smith film, also starring Gene Hackman, about surveillance. So if you've never seen The Conversation, BBC Two, 1 o'clock in the morning, Sunday morning. Meanwhile, you are ending with one of the great action films, I would say, of all time, Mr. Van Connor, and you poached this from right under my nose, did you not, you so-and-so?
Well, like I say, it's 25 years old this year, and we've not gotten to talk about it yet this year. So I thought, I've got to. We're nearly at the end of 2022. So while it's freshly 25 years old, I'm going to talk about Con Air, which kind of works like the Dirty Dozen in a way. That way of just getting a big all-star ensemble cast of, you know, who's who at the time, and also up-and-comers like Danny Trejo and people like that. I don't think Steve Buscemi was really that big a name at the time. And it's the story of the plane that transports all the convicts that gets taken over by said convicts. And it's funny you picked Under Siege this week, because this is kind of a similar idea of, it's Die Hard on air, And this time it's the one good convict who's on the plane when the convicts take over and has to die hard his way out of it. Said convict in this case being a freshly Oscar-winning, long-haired, wife-beater sporting, foghorn leghorn sounding Nicolas Cage as the inimitable, I think his name's Cameron Poe in this, who's really just trying to get home to his family and his little girl. Yeah, on his way home.
No trouble, keep his head down, do as he's told. No need for trouble. Oops, and then there's a plane crash.
Yeah, and of course, all he wants to do is deliver a stuffed bunny to his daughter. Is there any more noble intention than that?
So she comes up against the psychopaths, including Cyrus the Virus in this one. So you've got a clip for us, I think, Van, have you not? It's on ITV4, Sunday night, 9 o'clock.
It is indeed. It is, which is the perfect time for this. End the weekend with Con Air. And do you know what? Of course, if there's any clip I have to give you from the one and only Con Air, after everything I've just said, let's be honest, Paul, if you've seen the movie, you know which one I'm picking. If you haven't seen the movie, this is just going to sound deranged, but put that bunny back in that box.
And before we let you go, can you tell us about your off-screen podcast, Judy, which I think drops at 8 o'clock this morning?
Yes, you can hear myself and Adam Ball on all good podcast platforms on the Off-Screen Show. I'm very happy to say this week we are talking about the awesome new Christmas action movie Violent Night, which drops today. If you've not seen the marketing for this, it is literally Die Hard with the actual Santa, using Santa magic and bloody violence. It's incredible. Go and see it. And if you need persuading further than that, we have an entire podcast to do that for you.
We wish you a bloody Christmas. That's the Off-Screen podcast, 8 o'clock this morning. Meanwhile, here's Van's chosen clip from Con Air, which is on ITV4, Sunday night, 9 o'clock. Coming up the Met Office with the weekend's weather. Over to Con Air.
Appears the United States Parole Commission that... Oh, man. Oh, yeah.
Put the bunny back in the box.
I knew you was a punk, and I was right. You've been playing us all along. You a free man.
I said, put the bunny back in the box.
Put the bunny back in the box. Put the weather on the way. Cheers to Van Connor.
talkSPORT Breakfast.